Sayonara. Jude Law. Vanessa Ford. So we could start a bit traditionally, and I'll ask the two of you about the origins of this project. Was the script written and you and Stephen saw it? Because you two have collaborated before.
Well, I wrote this, I started writing it a very long time ago. I was working on a TV show and doing research at Bellevue, and I met a doctor named Sacha Bardet, who was our consultant on the movie. And I tailed him, he's a forensic psychiatrist, so I tailed him around Bellevue, and the first day I was there was a vampire. And then he's about 10 years ago, and the subway pusher was there. There were a lot of really fascinating cases, and I became very interested in the world of forensic psychiatry, and the story sort of percolated up out of that. So I think Stephen was aware that I was writing it for most of the last decade, and I was hoping that I would direct it, and that wasn't working out very well. And so at one point there was another project that we were going to do, and that didn't work out very well either. So Stephen, said that he had read the script and liked it, and would I do craft service instead of direct the movie? And produce.
And what about the script appealed to you?
I think, well, Scott, I knew about it. I knew what Scott was up to, and I really loved the idea that he'd sort of taken a sort of social issue, a very zeitgeisty issue, and sort of used it as a Trojan horse to kind of hide a thriller inside of. So I've been talking to him about it for a while, and we had worked for almost a year on Man from U.N.C.L.E., and suddenly and unexpectedly it kind of blew up. And I called him immediately and said, I thought we were going to be working together in April. Can we switch? Will you give me side effects? And he said yes. So this was a kind of movie that used to be made a lot, and for some reason sort of, I don't know if it just got priced out of existence or what, but in the 80s, which I've talked about as being probably the worst decade in American film, with the exception of some great independent filmmakers who were starting to emerge, and these kind of fun thrillers like Fatal Attraction or Jagged Edge that were just kind of great matinee movies, and like I said, they just kind of went away. And I was really excited about the idea of doing an updated version of that took advantage of the fact that we are. Well, let's put it this way. I started my career making a movie about someone who was seeing a psychiatrist and in 1989, the idea that Andie MacDowell in Sex Lies would have been medicated didn't even occur to me. And so here we are, 20 plus years later, and the idea that she wouldn't be medicated wouldn't occur to anyone. So that's a big, in 20 years, that's a big movement, I think. And thanks for coming.
I want to ask you one other question, and then talk to the actors. There is the prescription drugs, but there's also insider trading, and those I think we all think are the most, corrupt activities of our time. And I knew at the beginning that you weren't going to just drop one for the other. I mean, that seemed clear. And so it's the weave of them that's so fascinating. So did you have this thing of how do we keep this under thing of the insider trading going as a through line? Or did you think it would just come back when it needed to come back? I mean, it's a really fascinating structure.
Well, all I can say is of all the movies that I've worked on, except for The Limey, which was terrifying in post, the amount of effort that went into the first 35 minutes of this film was disproportionate to the rest of the film, and also disproportionate to almost anything I've ever made. Like the amount of time that we spent trying to find the right balance of rhythm, information, tone, so that, because we knew it wasn't, you know, there's movie A, and then there's movie B, and then there's movie C, but the first 35 minutes were so hard. We screened the movie a lot, not just for audiences, but for friends, and there were so many iterations. You know, we were really trying to figure out if we're trying to set this up as, you know, girl with a problem, and really make you believe that. What is the point at which people retain sympathy, and so, and we all agree here, like, you're not going to tell what happened. So the other thing was, part of the reason that I was hoping Channing would say yes is that he's Janet Leigh in Psycho. Like, you know, you need a movie star in that role so that you go like that when it happens. And we knew that was coming, but nobody else, the audience doesn't, and it was tricky.
Easier after we killed Gwen.
Yeah.
But
She gets to come back.
that's true. Yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, I mean, I've had people in my family who have suffered depression, and most people probably have, but one of the things when you're writing it seems like you could go on for a long time and sort of explore your therapy, and Rooney did such a great job of presenting the way a depressed person would, that it kind of obviated the need for about 20 pages. So that saved us, because I think, sadly, you know, watching someone who's really depressed as opposed to just someone who's sad becomes painful and hard.
Well, Rooney, this is a really complicated part because you're acting someone who's acting all the way through. And so I wondered what kind of decisions you made about, well, if you ever gave her any downtime from that act on the screen. Did you? Yeah.
It was really hard figuring out kind of how I was going to do it, because what I always try and do is I always try and find the truth in whatever it is. So it's hard to play a depressed person when you know they're not really depressed. So I tried to find different moments in the script where she wasn't faking it, where she genuinely was sort of doubting what she was doing or having thoughts about it, or anything like that. I tried to find as many moments like that as I could through the script where it was true and not just an act. But, you know, most of it is an act, and it was hard. It's a different kind of acting.
Yeah, it was really amazing. I mean, the first time I saw it, I had no idea what was coming. The second time I saw it, I knew. And so I saw you exactly for what that character is. And I thought, how did I miss this the first time that she's putting on an act? It was really just incredible balance.
Maybe Emily should have been an actress.
It was good for some scenes when I felt like I was really bad. I was like, well, she's just acting.
And I wanted to ask Jude, these, this is your second ambiguous character that you played for Stephen, where you're not quite, well, we're not quite sure if we're on your side because you're a little too slick for, I mean, you don't have very much empathy for this woman even at the beginning. So I was interested in how you found
Dr.
about
Banks did.
Yeah.
Dr. Banks didn't have anything.
Yeah. Yeah. If I had found a shrink like that, I would have been out the door in a minute.
Maybe if you were better, she wouldn't have killed it.
Or blame the doctor. I don't know about that.
That's an empathy.
Well, what we talked about was here's a guy who feels like he's moving, if everybody else is moving at 55 miles an hour, he feels like he's moving at 65. That there was just a there was just a little bit of a sense of, I got this all dialed in.
Yeah.
You know, because we knew where it was going,
Yeah.
and we wanted to see that all collapse. But you and I talked a lot about how to calibrate. We didn't want him to be a jerk, but we wanted that sense of, I got it all figured out,
Yeah.
I'm on this, there's
a
nothing that you can
smugness to
throw at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found really intriguing in both a positive and a slightly sinister way in investigating psychiatry and how it's applied nowadays was the absolute belief that they have that in the medicine, you know, they have to, because they see it working. I sat in with a lot of psychiatrists who, you know, you see them turning people's lives around. And so, like Stephen said, I think there's this part of him where he's just sitting there thinking, okay, new riddle. What's this? Okay, a little bit of this, 2 grams of that, 5 grams. Oh, that makes you sick. I got this. Try. You know what I mean? It's just it's a Sudoku. It's something I can work out. So when he can't work her out because she's faking, it drives him nuts. It's like the unsolvable riddle.
Well, in psychiatry, I mean, it's changed a lot. There are people who their experience of therapy was they would go and they would talk to somebody 1 or 2 times a week for 50 minutes. And now there are therapists who see 4 or 5 people in an hour, and they give them a prescription, and they ask them if their symptoms are going away. And he was, Banks was more informed by that kind of, he was willing to do that kind of psychotherapy, or that kind of psychopharmacology.
And where do you think this kind of psychopharmacology comes from as an institution, as a political, economic structure? What were your ideas about that?
I'm not touching.
Mine? Well, both my parents are psychologists, and so I grew up... What's so funny about that? They were parents. I didn't pick them. That's sort of the voice that you hear actually in the back of your head when you tell someone, both my parents are psychologists, and you hear like a crowd of people laughing. I think that, in the research that I did with Dr. Bardet and talking to other therapists, I think it's a problem. I think that, we talked, all of us, about how we've declared war on sadness in this society, and there's a difference between being sad, which may be a very well-reasoned response to something going on in your life, and a persistent, debilitating sadness, which is a thing called depression. And when the two get conflated, you do have to wonder, are we conflating them because it's an opportunity to sell more drugs? Or is it an opportunity for people who are watching commercials to go, shit, I feel bad, I'd like to feel better, it's not very attractive to be sad, so I'm going to take the thing that makes people feel better.
No, it's like the Chris Rock joke where he's talking about that, and he goes, I see these commercials, and they go, do you go to bed at night and wake up in the morning? And they want to sell you a pill for that. And so there is a point that you have to ask yourself, like, are these companies the arsonist and the fireman? I mean, that's the sort of open question, and it's really, I find it kind of fascinating when you combine it with the fact that whether it's this culture in this country or it's just human beings, like we're all looking for a shortcut. We're all looking for a shortcut to get where we want to get or get what we want to get. We're wired that way to like, shit, can I game this and get, and they play on that. You know, they just play on it. I play on it.
I want to get Vanessa into this conversation. I want to ask you about the last shot in the movie. Do you think that the fact that this nuclear family is in this car means that it's a happy ending? How did your character feel about the restoration of this family?
Well, as she said, she was in finance, so she understands about insider trading. So maybe she finally has some empathy for her husband. And knowing the details behind it all, perhaps he confessed it. So, you know, I think the happy ending is wonderfully not there.